Luckily, we had most of the cars out of the showroom because they had been sold just by chance. So I think there was only 2 in the showroom when it happened.
Wow.
Yeah.
Not like the Corvette Museum.
No.
And now I find myself, I think I screenshot by accident, no less than 10, 15 times a day.
And now
Just when I grab the
are
phone.
more out of compliance than in compliance with the variance. Does the city ever check up on things like that, or is there a process to where you can make sure that people are still conforming?
Is that out of the house?
Mm-hmm.
The only way we would know is if someone tells us about it. Otherwise,
Okay.
we don't go out and check every one of them because there's
Thank you.
too many of them for us to check.
I wanted to know.
Is Esther coming?
Probably not. If I was a betting person. Where's Jack?
I said he'd be here by 6:30. I just talked to him about 3 o'clock, so.
Hmm?
I just talked to him about 3 o'clock and said he'd be here just before 6:30.
Yeah.
It's
Then he should be here.
6:31 now.
Traffic is wild tonight.
Yes, it is. Should have seen coming home from Concord. I was like, wait, am I on the wrong side of the road? It was bumper to bumper. Okay, let me check off. Rob is here. Jay is here.
Can always start the intro part of things.
Huh?
We should start the intro.
Yeah, he can start the intro. I don't know it. I got this to do.
Do you want me to do it?
Do I have to beg?
Yeah. Thank you. Hi, welcome everybody. My name is Rob Shaw. I'm one of the full-time members of the Zoning Board. Mr. Jack Currier is our chair, and I do expect him to arrive very shortly. So I'm just going to initially start with some of our kind of housekeeping and intro material and assume that Jack will arrive shortly. Let me just quickly introduce everybody up here. We have Mr. Carter Falk, who is our Deputy Planning Manager with the city staff. Ms. Mary Ellen McKay, who is our clerk and full-time member. To my right, Jay, I'm drawing a blank on your last names. Welch. Mr. Jay Welch, full-time member. Oh, you are alternate, that's right. Mr. Steve Lionel, full-time member, and Ms. Kathy Batelli, alternate member. So we will, right now we have 5 of us, and expect that we'll actually have 6 of us by the time Mr. Currier arrives. We typically hear the cases and have everybody participate with all the members that are present. But we only have 5 members that actually vote on the cases that are before us. And that starts with all of the full-time members, and then the alternate members fill in as needed. Most likely, we'll basically arrange to probably go back and forth between our 2 alternates tonight again, based on Mr. Currier arriving. So we are volunteers that serve here on the zoning board. Great, Mr. Currier. I was just starting the intro part of things, so we are appointed by the mayor and approved by the Board of Aldermen. And essentially our purpose is to listen to cases that are brought forward where there is believed to be a need to do something different than what the land use code specifies. And there's both the state statutes as well as the local city ordinances, which determine most of what can be done regarding things like setbacks and densities and usages in different districts, et cetera. However, one size doesn't really fit all, and so there is this procedure for getting relief from the specifics of the zoning laws, where either through variance or special exception, a case is presented by the owner and/or the user of that property with approval of an owner. And typically, there's 5 points of law that have to be followed to get approval of a case. I want to make sure if we have, forget if we have just variances tonight, or, yes, we only have variances tonight, so I'll only speak to those cases and how we handle that. So there's 5 points of law that need to be satisfied for the board to deem that the variance criteria are met. And they basically have to do with the actual use of the property, that there's some special condition about the property that should allow for this to be the case. That the usage and the request is within the spirit and intent of the ordinance. Again, not that it's, so it's typically something that we believe would have been at least expected to have been covered by the law, but because of the specifics, there needs to be some relief. That property values of surrounding parcels would not be adversely affected. That this variance would not be contrary to public interest, and substantial justice will be served to the applicant by granting the variance. Procedurally, we will go through testimony by the applicant. Everything is recorded. You'll see we all have microphones up here, so it's recorded audio-wise. There's also video recording that's going on right now through the cameras around the room. So there are video recordings that are then available at nashua.nh.gov at our site. So you can find those there, as well as the audio recordings. And then there are written minutes that are the official transcript or official document of our meetings. The procedure for going through the cases is, again, the applicant will come up and present the case. They have up to 15 minutes to present the reasons why the application should be approved. There's a timing light here that'll be used. It counts down. It's 14 minutes for the, it's green for the first 14 minutes, then goes to yellow for the final minute, and then the red, and time is up. After that, we'll ask if anybody else wants to speak in favor of an application, and each subsequent person that wants to come forward in that manner would have up to 5 minutes to speak, again, in support of the case. After that, we'll ask if anybody has questions, concerns, or opposition to a case, and you'll have 5 minutes for that. All those 5-minute ones are similarly governed by the clock, with except 4 minutes for green, 1 minute for yellow, and then to red. Typically, the board will ask questions either at the end of testimony or sometimes during the testimony that's being provided. And that whole part of things is all part of the public hearing. If there is opposition, then there'll be an opportunity for the applicant to come back after all the other testimony has been given for 5 minutes of essentially the rebuttal to that opposition testimony. And then one person, and only one person of those who spoke in opposition, can come back for the additional 5 minutes. So if we have multiple folks that spoke in opposition, you'll have to confer and decide who you would want to be that one person that would take care of the opposition final testimony. After all that's said and done, we close the public hearing and open a public meeting. That's where those of us, again, here will deliberate and then vote on either approval, denial, or possibly tabling the case. So there should be some kind of action that comes from that public meeting that we hold here. If any parties are basically dissatisfied with that, there is a 30-day window of appeal for filing a rehearing request, which then would come back to the board for us to consider if the rehearing request is warranted or not. And then we would basically deliberate on that and determine if that happens, and we would approve the rehearing request on a case, then basically that will stop the case from its approval or denial previously, and we would basically end up rehearing the case at a subsequent date. So you'll definitely hear Mr. Carrier remind folks somewhere along the way that if we do approve of something, that there'll be a 30-day window of appeal, and that's basically noted so that if somebody starts their work and there is a rehearing request, your work could end up being forced to stop, that there would basically be a stay on that original approval. And then if that's not met satisfactorily to those that are feel aggrieved by that, the next step is through Superior Court, Hillsborough County Superior Court. There are agenda copies in the back of the room on the table if anybody wants to see that. I believe we just have the 3 cases tonight. Only 2 cases now.
There's 3 cases, but 2 were postponed. There's a case for
Yeah.
2 to 4 Henry David Drive. That is going to go on the 2nd meeting in January 2018. And there's also a case for 34 Franklin Street. It's the Lofts 34 apartment complex. That was going to be on tonight, but that will be held on the December 12th meeting. So those 2 cases will not be on tonight.
So I think, also again, back to the fact that we're doing the audio recording, please, if you, and everybody does these days, have a cell phone especially, please either put it on vibrate or silent mode. And we also ask that if anybody wants to have conversations about anything, that you please take that outside of the auditorium, because the acoustics in this hall are actually quite good, and it's actually very easy to hear those conversations going on in the audience. So are there any procedural questions, anything that maybe isn't clear about how the process works or that anybody wants to have clarified? Okay, seeing none, anything from the board that we need to cover that I might have omitted? Okay.
I think we're
I'll
good to
turn-
go. Great job.
Thank you. Turn it back to you. I should know this kind of after all these years, so.
Yep.
I did note that we have now the 4 full-time and 2 alternates, so we'll have to note as far as which of the alternates are voting on which cases as we go.
Sure.
Right, so,
Maybe they can alternate.
yes.
The alternate. Well, I think on case number 1, why don't we start off with Ms. Vitale voting. And again, all members will be weighing in and providing their opinions. And so without any questions in the audience, we'll open the public hearing on case number 1. The owner is Scott and Sharon Susi. The address is 12 Montgomery Avenue, and the request is a variance to encroach up to 7 feet into the 10-foot right side yard setback to construct a 32 feet 6 inch by 28-foot addition that would connect the back of the house to the left side of the detached garage. Again, it's 12 Montgomery Avenue in the RA zone. Hi, good evening. If you'd like to give us your name and address and walk us through your application.
Hi, my name is Kevin Corvo, the contractor. I'm also family friends of Scott, Sharon, Susie.
Okay, hi, welcome.
And we're also joined by Sharon's parents, Richard and Sheila.
Okay, well, is what you're going to be putting up there the same as in our package, do you know?
I think these are just renderings that are,
Oh, okay.
that may not be included in your package.
Yeah, I don't think we've seen those, so feel free to stick those up on the board so all in the audience can see, in addition to us.
All right. So, thank you, and this is my first time presenting to zoning board, so I appreciate any patience you can give us. And so there are 5 points of law that we have in granting this variance. The first one being it will not be contrary to public interest. Granting this variance will not be contrary to public interest since, as you know, this is an existing garage, an existing house, and the existing garage is within the setback, and that will not change. It's been there for many years, so it's important to note that this area, there are many garages that are and other structures that are within the setbacks. This includes the garage and shed immediately next door at 10 Montgomery. And I also included in your packet a kind of neighborhood map, and you will see that on that map, there are approximately 24 or so non-conforming substructures that are within the setbacks in this neighborhood. So it's just quite common that, that there are garages, existing structures within the setbacks in this neighborhood. And that will, again, that will not change. What we are proposing is an addition. Here's the existing garage that's within the setback. What we're proposing is an addition between the garage and the house, which will connect, which will cause the house and the garage to be connected, and therefore we need to apply for this variance. The proposed use will observe the spirit of the ordinance. The proposed addition will not conflict with the explicit or implicit purpose of the ordinance. The proposed addition to the rear of the house will not negatively affect the character of the neighborhood. The garage, again, is pre-existing, non-conforming structure that has existed for many years. The proposed addition and connection to the existing garage is for the owner's elderly parents. Their elderly parents need first floor access, and because of their instability and handicap, the garage will provide them, the connected garage will provide them all-weather access. In fact, if the variance is not granted, the addition will still be built. We will just not connect it to the garage, but I think it would look quite funny and probably negatively affect the property values. But the owners have certainly, they put a lot of thought and effort into making this, this addition look as if it has been built there from the beginning. Substantial justice would be done to the property owner by granting this variance, because it would allow for the first floor living area for the owner's parents. Both owners are in the healthcare business and would be able to care for their parents in their own home. The connected garage will make their access safer, especially during the winter months. Both Sharon and Scott work for Genesis Healthcare, which owns Langdon Place in Nashua, so they have expensive experience with assisted living and the needs for the handicapped and elderly. So we feel that this access in particular is needed in this circumstance. The proposed addition will not decrease the value of any neighboring property. The owners have one of the most well-kept properties on the street. Furthermore, the addition will be at the back of the house and will not be visible. The front of the house is here, the driveway, so I guess maybe this may be visible from the street, but overall, the addition is in the back of the property. And also, I think that new construction and investment into properties is a good thing and tends to increase property values in the neighborhood. The special conditions that exist on this property, it's important to note that the Susie's property, they have about 15,000 square feet, so it's a quite a large lot. And in fact, they are in the RA zone, so I think, if I'm not mistaken, it's 7,500 square feet per lot in that zone. So they really almost have, they have enough square footage for a double lot. But the way they're gonna use this will be quite minimal as far as square footage goes. And also, something to point out about their lot. Their lot is very long and narrow, so it's only 75 feet, which is quite common on that street, on the frontage. It goes back, all the way to the street and back. And at the rear of the property, it's only about 51 feet wide. So by putting this addition on the back of the house, keeping the garage as is with its existing setback, keeping the existing house with its existing setback is probably the best use of this lot. And that's all I have.
All right, thank you for your testimony. Any questions from the board? You silence us all. You sure you haven't done this before?
Never. Although Carter and I have dealt with many, in the building department, I've dealt with Carter a lot, so.
All right. I think we're okay with your testimony. I didn't know, if the owners wanted to speak or were okay with what's been presented.
No, we don't need. We're okay.
Okay. Very well. Is there anybody else to speak in favor of this request? Sir, if you'd like to come, you folks could have a seat there, and sir, you're welcome to up to 5 minutes of testimony in favor we're seeking at this point. And if you could start with your name and address.
My name is Albert Serwa, and my wife Jean and I both own the property directly across from the Susie's. Our address is 15 Montgomery Ave. My wife and I have discussed this, and we have spoken to Sharon, or at least I have, and we have no reason or cause for any objections to their request for the variance. We see that as an improvement on our street, and we are totally in favor of it.
All right, thank you, Mr. Serba. Any questions?
Could you spell your last name, please?
Yeah.
S-I-R-O-I-S.
Thank you very much.
All right, thank you for that. Was there anybody else to speak in favor of the proposed addition at 12 Montgomery Avenue? Anybody with questions, concerns, or opposition? Questions, concerns, opposition to the, seeing none? We'll close the public hearing and open the public meeting. Thoughts? Mr. Shaw?
Completely in support of this. I mean, this is one of those kind of technicalities, and with the fact of this existing garage structure really being what becomes the issue by connecting the addition, I see no benefit to force the homeowners to keep it disconnected. So this has been a long occurring incursion into the setback. Plus, it's already something that's fairly prevalent in this neighborhood. We've seen that in other neighborhoods like this, that oftentimes these structures are that way. But especially, this is, the property owners are going to make a nice improvement, and I see no benefit to anyone by not essentially allowing them to connect the house to the garage by this addition.
All right, thank you. Mr. Welch?
I don't have any issue with this. I support the application.
Mr. Lionel?
I concur with Mr. Shaw, Mr. Welch.
Ms. Vitale?
100% concur.
All right. My thoughts is Mr. Shaw's spoken words for me. I think it's interesting how, if this weren't permitted, they would still build the addition without the connection, and I find every reason to allow that connection. So I'm with it as well. Ms. McKay?
I concur. You said what I was going to say, and so did they.
All right. Would somebody like to make a motion? If not, I'll go for it. Mr. Shaw?
Sure. Okay, I'd like to make a motion on behalf of Scott and Sharon Susi, the owners and applicant, at 12 Montgomery Avenue. The request again is for a variance to encroach up to 7 feet into the 10-foot right side yard setback to construct a 32-foot by 6-inch by 28-foot addition that would connect the back of the house to the left side of a detached garage. This is in the RA zone. The variance is needed to enable the applicant's proposed use of the property. The special conditions of the property are that this is a existing garage that has been in existence for a long time and incurring into the setback, so there's no new incursion into the setback. And the applicant's intention of building an addition is such that it's going to still essentially go in the same place, and without this variance, they would be forced to not connect the addition and the house to the garage. So that seems to not be within the spirit and intent of the ordinance. So by allowing them to do that, they'll be able to get full use of the property, and there's no adverse effects. There's no adverse effects apparently, at least from what we can see on surrounding property values, and the applicant has noted that they believe, if anything, it should only help those property values. It's not contrary to public interest, and substantial justice will be served. So I do make the motion to approve this variance request.
We have a motion on the table, seconded by Mr. Lionel. Any discussion on the motion? Seeing none, a show of hands in favor of the motion, and so that's unanimous. So your motion is granted, and again, there is this 30-day window of appeal. Perhaps unlikely, there was no opposition, but just keep that in mind. You can pull your permits tomorrow, but up to 30 days, the appeal process is still open. I urge caution with that and to let that time out, but you can do with what you want. And with that, I wish you congratulations and good luck on it, and we'll close the public meeting on case number 1, and we'll move right along and open the public hearing on case number 2. Actually, you mind leaving those? Could you just fold them up and
Yeah, I could
bring them
use
up,
those,
Mr.
Kevin.
Falk, because we'll keep that in for 30 days as well. So thank you for bringing those up to Mr. Falk. So I'll open the public hearing on case number 2. The owner is William and Patricia Rigg. The address is 16 Boulevard Drive. The description is a request for a variance to exceed maximum accessory use area. In the RA zone, 40% is permitted. Currently, 36% is existing. The request is to encroach 43% in the accessory use area to replace an above-ground swimming pool with an in-ground swimming pool. Who is here to present this case? Hi, sir. If you'd like to come to the microphone and just give us your name and address.
Hi, my name is William Rigg, and I reside at 16 Boulevard Drive, Nashua.
How you doing?
Excuse me.
Very good.
Mr. Chair.
What?
I just want to note, we should, I'm assuming Mr. Welch will be our alternate
I'm
that
sorry if I-
participates in
yeah.
the voting on this case?
So just to clarify, thank you. Mr. Welch will be voting, and Ms. Vitale will be participating but not voting. Thank you. As you were?
Okay, and I'm here tonight because I'd like to replace a above-ground pool with a in-ground pool. Not changing the look of the property. The property's already got vinyl fencing with a locked gate on the side, and I'm not encroaching on anybody's properties, and it's pretty much it.
Yeah, I think your application speaks for itself. Let me just start off and see if there's any questions for Mr. Rigg. If not, I guess I had a couple comments or questions. I couldn't tell from the street, but from Google Maps, it looks like you're not the only pool in the neighborhood. It looks like there's actually
No,
quite
both
a few.
neighbors on both sides of me have pools above grounds, and then the neighbor next to him has a built-in, and across the street, 4 houses up from us, they have a built-in pool also. So I'm not asking to do anything out of the ordinary.
You probably never get complaints about pool noise either, I bet.
No.
All right. Again, any questions for Mr. Rigg? All right, well, thanks. A pretty straightforward application. We'll see what comes up.
Thank you.
You could have a seat. Is there anybody else to speak in favor of the proposed in-ground pool at 12 Boulevard Drive? Oh, I'm sorry, you're right, 16. Should have my reading glasses on. 16. Anybody with questions or concerns about the proposed in-ground pool? Seeing none, I'll close the public hearing and open the public meeting. Thoughts? Mr. Welch, would you like to kick off?
Sure. I think the request fits the character of the neighborhood. I don't have any issue with it.
All right, Mr. Shaw?
Yeah, I'm good with it. I mean, this is RA zone, this lot, and most of the surrounding lots appear to be, pretty much right at that, 7,500 square feet. So this, there's already been an existing usage there. Granted, it was under the 40%, but the overage here, 43 versus 40. I think basically it's the only relief then, if we weren't to approve this, is would force the applicant to go to a slightly smaller pool, and I don't see that there would be any benefit in doing that. So by all appearances, this is a pretty straightforward and reasonable request.
Thank you. Mr. Lionel?
What Mr. Shaw said is fine.
Ms. Vitale?
I don't have any issue with it. The only thing that I just happen to think about is, if the existing above ground has decking and what they are doing for decking for the in-ground, if that was calculated in the percentages.
Ask Mr.
believe
Falk
we-
while
I believe
he's...
we figured it all out pretty accurately and should be advertised correctly.
Okay, thank you. And I'm good with it. It's within character, and it's not that much of a difference of percentages.
And I think Mr. Shaw has covered it all for me as well. I'm in support of it. Ms. McKay?
I agree. Mr. Shaw covered it quite well, and I too am in support.
All right. Mr. Lionel, would you like to
Sure.
stay in shape here and hazard a motion?
Okay. I'd like to make a motion to approve the variance request. Owner William and Patricia Rigg, address is 16 Boulevard Drive. The request is a variance to exceed the maximum accessory use area, 40% permitted, 36% existing, 43% requested, to replace an in-ground swimming pool with an, to replace an above-ground swimming pool with an in-ground swimming pool. The variance is needed to do this replacement, given the shape and size of the lot. There's the overage is relatively minor, and there's no particular purpose in denying that. It's within the spirit and intent of the ordinance. It will not adversely affect the property values of surrounding parcels. Most of the surrounding parcels already have pools. There's no public interest issue, and substantial justice would be served. So I make a motion to approve this variance.
Motion on the table for approval, seconded by Mr. Shaw. Any discussion on the motion for approval? Seeing none, a show of hands in favor. So that's unanimous. So congratulations on that. Again, there's a 30-day window of appeal. I don't know if you're going to be putting a pool in the fall or in this cold weather.
There's no frost, they could start digging and get ahead of the process
Aha.
earlier in the spring, so.
All right, well, remember, there's a 30-day window of appeal, so keep that in mind. If you have any questions, you can ask Mr. Falk tomorrow on that. All right, and with that, I'll close the public meeting on case number 2, and you could have a good evening. Are we good to keep going? All right, let's keep moving. Case number 3. The owner is Carmen Capone and David DeBlois. The address is 75 Manchester Street. There's 3 variance requests tonight. I'll read all of them into the record. Number 1 is to exceed the maximum number of principal structures permitted on the lot. 1 is permitted, 7 are proposed. Number 2, to exceed the maximum density allowed, the minimum of 7,260 square feet of land required per unit, and what's proposed is 7,175 square feet per dwelling. And then the 3rd is to permit the construction of a driveway within 50 feet of the intersection of Manchester Street and the proposed travelway to the development. Again, 50 feet is a minimum, and what's proposed is 40 feet. Good evening.
Good evening, Mr. Chairman, members of the board.
Oh, I'm sorry to clarify, Ms. Vitale will be voting, and Mr. Welch will be participating.
Okay. For the record, my name is Gerald Prunier. I'm an attorney with offices at 20 Trafalgar Square in Nashua. I'm here this evening representing the applicant. I'm here this evening representing the applicant with our engineer, Mr. Richard Maynard. Is it okay now, or? Okay. If I start moving away from it, let me know.
You can pull
You
the
can
mic.
pull that, you want to just hold the mic in your hand, just pull it off the stand, and
Thank
now
you.
you can keep it close easier, I think.
Thank you. The piece of property we're talking about this evening is located on the northerly side of Manchester Street at 75 Manchester Street. What we're proposing is, and requesting, is a variance for 7 units of detached single-family housing on a piece of property that is presently occupied by 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 buildings that will all be demolished and torn down. And I'll let Mr. Maynard talk about this, the front part of the site. This area is located in an RA district, which allows 6 units per acre, or 7,250 square feet required. The zoning ordinance is quiet about the fact of being separated. They allow 6 units. So if we will put them all in one building, if we wanted just 6, we wouldn't have to be here this evening. The property is over 50,000 square feet, so it is more than an acre. What we're looking for, as far as the density is concerned, is about 85 square feet per unit. The total number of, the density required is, as I indicated, was 7,260 square feet. We're providing 7,175 square feet, or about 80 square feet per building that we don't meet the square footage requirement for, or about 455 square feet for the total site. It's less than 1% for the total site. The property is in irregular shape, narrow and deep, with some topo leading from the back to the front part of the property. The present buildings that are occupied have 8 units, and this is according to the assessor's notes, and we are proposing to tear down and demolish these buildings and propose to build the 7-unit single-family detached buildings. If I may, Mr. Chairman, could I pass out?
Sure. Yep.
A and B of the document shows pictures of the houses that exist presently, and they show their age, and it's proposed that those be demolished. C is showing some, along Monadnock Street, the size of the square footage of the lots. Some are much smaller than ours, others are a little bit larger. Show that there are many differences. And also, as far as the property itself, we have a letter from, Keller Williams. And Mr. Chairman, if I may, I should read that into the record. This is, gentlemen and ladies, on behalf of the applicants, David D. Blois and Carmen Capone, I have been asked to evaluate the impact, if any, on the surrounding property values that proposed variances from the National Zoning Ordinances would have if granted. To provide such an evaluation, I reviewed the variance application in its entirety, including the proposed plan of the land, the proposed homes to build, and other relevant information in a thorough and considered manner. My review also included the existing conditions plan, meeting with the applicant's engineer, Richard Maynard, to discuss and thoroughly understand proposed betterments to the site, such as demolition of existing structures, possible screening, proposed improvements to the site distance, and orientation of proposed infrastructure and dwelling in relation to the abutting properties. I also reviewed certain parts of the City of Nashua's land use code relative to the RA zone. Additionally, I have visited the site in the past. I have driven by the site in daytime and nighttime, where I focused on the rear yards of the existing homes on the north side of Monadnock Street in their relationship to 75 Manchester Street. With this review and research in mind, in my opinion, the granting of the variances as requested will not diminish the values of the surrounding properties. In fact, I believe there will be substantial private and public benefits realized once the improvements are implemented. The private sector, especially the abutting property owners, will enjoy the external improvements immediately. The existing structures appear to be in disrepair and beyond their functional life. They will be demolished. The new homes to be built will most likely have a higher market value than the average homes in the area. Their property values, from that perspective alone, will be enhanced. Meanwhile, the community, especially those people driving by 75 Manchester Street, will benefit by improvements made to the current site distance and the relocation of the proposed entrance to the site. The applicants will create safer travel conditions. Also, the redevelopment of the site will add much-needed inventory of more affordable homes to our marketplace. This particular lot is quite unique in many aspects. On the north side, it abuts Greeley Park, one of Nashar's most beautiful treasures. It is irregular in shape, narrow and deep, and nestled amongst existing residential homes to the east and south, with no other outlet to another street. Various development opportunities may exist. Per the permitted density calculations in the RA zone, in the granting of a variance, the applicant could have a proposed 9 elderly dwelling units. These units could have been single-family, duplex, or multi-family style. If that were approved, the abutters would have 9 elderly housing units, each one being less than 1,000 square feet as required by the National Land Use Code, and one community center to serve this community. The average market value of these 3 dwellings would be far less than the proposed homes to be built. In conclusion, I consider the project a win-win and would urge the approval of variances as requested. Randy Termel, Principal of Keller Williams Realty. And at this time, if I could, I would like to turn over to our project engineer, Mr. Maynard, to explain the other characteristics of the site.
The next issue of concern is driveway site distances. By locating the common driveway on the southerly side of the frontage, which is indicated by the site distance is indicated here on the plan in pink and on your little sketch, we can achieve over 250 feet of site distance in both directions. Sliding the driveway northerly, as you would see along the frontage, would significantly reduce site distance, especially for cars coming from the south, resulting in an unsafe condition. Regardless of what is built on this property, the entrance driveway must be in the southerly end of the Manchester Street frontage. The other issue is the separation of the driveway for the first home from Manchester Street, and that's this particular thing. The ordinance is really for corner lots and road to road, but it's also applicable to driveways to roads. The ordinance requires 50 feet from the driveway to the right-of-way line or the property line, whereas in this case, we only have 40 feet. However, if you measure the distance from the driveway to the pavement of Manchester Street, we have a full 50 feet. There's no question, more than adequate site distance in all directions here, both on the Manchester Street curve and both on from the driveway to the intersection with particular Manchester Street. So that is, because of the way that the entrance to this property has to be located, it limits the types of development we can do here. A city subdivision with a road down the middle puts the driveway up here, and this whole curve here restricts the site distance to the south. Therefore, that's not a particularly good alternative. The Keller Williams letter suggests to you we can also do elderly housing, which is something like this, but a much lower valuation, and therefore would not necessarily enhance property values. It also need to emphasize that we have less density than 4 of the homes already existing on Monadnock Street, and as Mr. Prunier explained to you,
we only lack 80 feet per house to meet the density requirement, so it's a very marginal request with regard to density. In fact, it only comes out to 1.2% less than required by the ordinance, so it's essentially very close to the ordinance itself. This will end up being a common driveway maintained by the residents of the property. This will be a condominium-type association. The 7 homeowners will be responsible for the maintenance of the common driveway, and then they'll have their own individual property requirements, very similar to a subdivision. So I suggest to you that this meets all the 5 criteria, overwhelmingly so, and it's an excellent use for this particular property. Thank you.
Any questions for Mr. Maynard? We have,
Oh, I forgot one more thing. We had an abutter meeting with all our folks here, and we entertained a few questions. Some of them requested a fence along the southerly property line, which is really a planning board issue, but we've suggested that our owners will agree to provide that fence if that continues to be a request of the neighbors. So we're talking about potentially a fence along this side to the Monadnock Street homes. One more thing to point out, which I'm sure Mr. Shaw will ask me about. Because of our ordinance, the sides of this lot only require a 10-foot setback, but the houses up here on the north side, I've laid it out, and I will agree to a stipulation that we'll have an 18-foot setback from the rear of the house to the property line there. Over here, the setback is the typical one for the site, and there'll also be a 10-foot separation from the edge of our common driveway pavement to the southerly property line. Thank you. Now I'm ready.
did he answer your question?
No, that's fine. So I guess part of what I know your justification is about the placement of the driveway and not having it on the more northerly part of the property. But my first thought about this whole proposal was, why not have the homes that are proposed butting up against the other homes and have the driveway? So here's my question for you, and you probably know where I'm going, but if you go back to 6 units instead of 7, then you don't have the density issue. You bring that driveway in, however you want to S it or curve it or whatever, and run that along the north side of the property so that the backs of these proposed dwellings are abutting the backyards of the Monadnock Street homes. Was that considered, and why would that not be viable?
Yes. Very much was considered in that regard. You cannot, if you run a driveway up along the north curve, before you can get that driveway, how do I explain this? You have to have the entrance here because of sight distance. There's no way away from that.
I'm giving you that.
It doesn't work anywhere
Right.
as well along the frontage. Then, because our road layout requirements, they call for curves of 125-foot radius, which means you're gonna have a road that goes all the way like this and like that. It eats up half of the area along this particular lot. We end up with some very odd-shaped layouts. We get significantly less room for less homes. So it's not as efficient a layout, and it ends up with some very irregular layouts. The proposed fence along the southerly property line, which is here, should provide plenty of a buffer for the people along the Monadnock. So
In that, I understand what you're saying, but, so the house that's closest to Manchester Street, was it considered that you could kind of S around that, you keep that one there, and you essentially, I would look at this and say, you basically cut through the second one and shift things over?
I'm
Was
gonna
that-
tell you, I would lose the space for 2 houses. It's that serious, the way you have to S-curve it to get in there.
Okay.
Remember, this is a very narrow lot, too, so when you start S-curving in a narrow lot, you don't have much room left in that particular area.
Okay, I'm good for the moment.
Ms. Vitale?
You're talking about the 40 feet proposed where it should be 50 feet to the intersection. If I'm reading this correctly, that's your 40 feet from here to the driveway, is that
All
what
right.
you're talking
The
about?
ordinance is not overly clear. It's hard, it's difficult to understand, but when you've been in the practice long enough, we know what its intent is. But anyway, the ordinance tells you on a corner lot that they want 50 feet to the intersection of two roadways. In this particular case, the intersection is a common driveway in Manchester Street, which approximates corner lot. In this particular case, the 50 feet would be measured from the driveway to this, called the right-of-way line or the front property line. In this particular case, we only have 40. However, the real intent of this ordinance is to give plenty of sight distance along here. So from our driveway to the travelway, we have an additional 10 feet, so we can provide the full 50 feet to the travelway, to the pavement of Manchester Street, which is effectively meeting the spirit and intent of the ordinance. And in this particular case, we still have plenty of sight distance here. It's not, we're on a corner lot where you have speeding cars coming through the intersections, things like that. We have a much better situation than normal, so we don't necessarily need the full 50 feet.
Be that as it may.
Yes.
And I understand your, spirit and intent part. Couldn't you achieve it just by flipping the driveway on that house?
All right. Yes, if you don't agree with me, I will end up flipping it. The property slopes up from here to there, and the preferred design and layout for houses to make them work well is have the garage on the lower side than the upper side. Yes, we can flip the house and make it the other way. I don't think that improves anything. Doesn't change the situation here at all. I don't think you achieve any betterment, and you end up with it'll work, but you'll have a less than ideal layout grading-wise for your particular house. It's not uncommon to have a garage to be slightly lower than the first floor living space with front entry garages.
Hence the reason everything's on the left side.
Excuse me?
Is that the same reason why everything's showing on the left side on your plan?
That's why all the other ones have the driveway on the left side, to be on the low side, yes.
All set, Mr.
For the
Shaw?
moment.
Oh, not for- Yeah, Mr. Shaw?
Yeah, and this might be first a clarification for Mr. Falk, so I actually was thinking that this whole thing about, and it's really a follow-up to Ms. Vitale's question. So I understand you're talking about the driveway, this distance from this driveway
Driveway
out-
of the very
out
first house, correct.
along this travelway, but my whole thought was, isn't there an issue about this travelway, which is still a driveway for the property, and its distance from the intersection? Or is that not something that city staff felt was,
You mean from here down to Monadnock?
no, back to, is it Lee or whatever?
The next street up, on the
Yeah,
other side of the road?
yeah.
That doesn't apply in this particular case. That's a different regulation. That's not the regulation.
I think you mean Lee Street, like if
Yeah.
the roads are supposed to
Yeah.
connect?
Yeah.
Or, right, because it basically, this driveway is kind of coming out where that intersection is. So I didn't know if that's actually where I thought this was applying originally. I didn't understand
Yeah.
that it was internal, but,
It's the individual driveway, the first
okay,
house.
all right.
But there are engineering standards about the code desiring streets to not have a little bit of
You're
an
talking about
offset.
not having offset intersections from
Right.
opposite
Yeah,
sides
I
of
know
the
that's
street.
Yeah.
the engineering term.
In this particular case, that's not what we're talking about, but I'll talk to you in a minute about it now. This situation is quite unique because of the safety issue of the curve, and that far overrides that offset intersection issue, which I think is what you're referring to.
Yeah, yeah.
And in this particular case, the driveway is close to lining up, so it's not like you're getting out and there's another driveway over there. The driveway's in your line of sight, so the point being is the driveway's 50 or 100 feet away to your right, and you have to look over there and you're looking here. That's the safety issue, that's why they want them to line up. And but that's not what we're asking for tonight, that's a different matter.
My other question was, you referenced it, and Mr. Attorney Prunier read it from Mr. Turmel's letter. I guess I'm trying to understand if either in all the considerations for what might be done with this lot, but the statement about the elderly housing, it's predicated upon a variance approval. And I feel like anybody could come in and say, well, I'm going to build a 7-story building here as long as I can get a variance for it, so you could be dealing with that. So I'm trying to understand why this was stated this way, because to me,
I take no credit for it,
okay,
he threw it in there.
So it's not that there was, this was some other consideration for the property that's actively, under.
I don't consider that necessarily desirable for this particular neighborhood. They have elderly housing of lower value.
I'm just finding it then more or less
I
a
don't know
red
why they
herring
threw it in there.
argument.
We don't
like-
tell these people what to write.
Yeah, no, but I didn't know if it was because there was some discussion about, well, other options we're considering for the property or that kind of thing, so.
Well, yeah, we
So
did look at that, but, it wasn't, to us, it wasn't
But I guess, yeah, so I think that argument, to me, doesn't carry much weight when it says it also requires a variance approval. I like the ones that say, with no variance, we could do X, Y, or Z, and we've heard plenty of those from you on other applications, so.
And by the by, the assessor's record indicates that there's 8 units of residential housing here. This is a mishmash of a property. It potentially could have as many as a dozen units in there. It's really it's really non-conforming. I think a lot of it's illegal, et cetera. Who knows what's in there? However, the 8 units, if people chose, we could have gone with that and just rehabbed it in place and ended up with 8 units of multifamily, because it's already grandfathered, it's already pre-existing for years. So I didn't consider that a particularly good idea for this particular thing, but other options, we don't know of any. This is, to me, this is the only reasonable one and the best for the neighborhood.
And just one more.
If somebody's got better ideas, tell me, but.
Yeah, no, I'm sure I know the general answer to this, but if you were to put a city street in, is it possible, and if you did that, how many units would you be able to place on this?
6, we'd probably be able to put 6 units. The street would take up twice the room of our common driveway and achieve no particular advantages or benefits, other than we wouldn't have to talk to you folks. But, more pavement, more loss of green space, less housing, more expensive. The city would have to maintain that, so there's.
I would also expect there would probably be engineering requirements for stuff with the sight lines in the intersection at least.
Yeah, we'd have to meet those same
so-
requirements too, but yes. But a city street provides no advantage to anybody, whether it's us, the neighbors, and/or the city itself. There's no benefit to putting a city street here.
All right, thank you.
Mr. Lionel, do you have a question?
Yeah, the sight line along Manchester Street, especially coming from the north, in the winter, when the snow gets piled up by the snow plows, that's going to, as far as I can tell, I live in this neighborhood, that would be a blind intersection coming from the north, that there would not be any 250-foot sight line. You could not see anybody coming out of that driveway, or the people in the driveway couldn't see the oncoming traffic.
That's relatively true of any driveway onto any road. Even if you come in square, there's still if people don't plow the thing properly, then there's still a snowbank to look over and beyond. The point being, if we're out here, and looking to the north, we only have to see to the other side of the street, not to the same side, because that's not where the oncoming cars are. So that's the point of the arrow, so. Yes, if people are sloppy in snow plowing, of course, there's always a problem. Doesn't matter whether it's our situation or anybody's situation, whether it's your own personal driveway or what if you don't, if the guy you hire that snowplow doesn't pay attention to what he's doing, or you don't insist it, you're gonna have a snowbank just about every time.
Well, and also, I mean, removing the snow of this shared access lot, you said this was would be the shared responsibility of the homeowners. Is there a homeowners association with fees, and who's paying for that?
All right, well, that's a planning board issue, but I will talk to you a moment. Yes, there will be a homeowners association. However, that's a planning board issue.
Well,
Yes.
that's true, but one of the things we consider is how it affects surrounding properties and how, I mean, to me, how snow removal is done affects surrounding properties.
Again, that's not a zoning issue, that's a pure planning issue. And yes, there will be a homeowners association that's responsible for the maintenance of the road, which includes snow plowing. There are no zoning criteria for snow plowing. I'm being blunt, but
Ms. Vitale?
We're being asked to consider to exceed the maximum number of principal structures permitted per lot. 1 is permitted, 7 is proposed. So even though it's a planning board issue, you're asking us to consider 7 structures.
no, that's a
And-
zoning issue.
Yes, you're asking us to consider
Yes,
the
that's why we're
7
here, yeah.
structures, correct?
Correct.
Even though it's planning board.
It isn't planning board,
Now
it's
listen,
zoning.
let me, don't interrupt, please. The snow, we have to consider if that doing 6 versus 7, we have to consider it, how it's going to affect the whole neighborhood and the residents that will in the future live there. And we are going to decide whether we're going to allow the 7 structures versus a different amount or not approve it at all. Because of that, I would look at it as what those future residents are going to do, and I probably would not approve this at 7 structures because I don't see how they can possibly do their snow in a proper way under what you have proposed here on this street. I would approve, the most I can see myself as approving
Wow.
is 6 for this.
I'll start back. The snow removal, whether it's 5, 6, or 7 homes, is always the same. In this particular case, there's a full 10 feet along the side of the roadway for plowing snow, for the common driveway. And there's also a full area over here for plowing snow. There's plenty of places to put the snow out of the way of any of the particular driveways. So, I don't know what else I can tell you about that, so.
All right. Mr. Welch, did you have a question?
Yeah, I have a question about what parking is gonna look like,
What was?
what the parking situation is gonna be.
Parking, yes.
So, you said there's a garage on the proposed houses?
Each house has a single garage, front entry,
Yep.
and then there's a parking space in the driveway outside the
Single car?
garage. A full parking space, yes.
Okay, so one in the garage, one in the parking?
Yes. Every house is set back at least 20, if not 24 feet, so there's more than room for a vehicle.
Okay.
I have a question on the sight lines. I don't live in this neighborhood, but when I went to look at this proposal, are you saying the sight lines are improved with this? And if so, how are they improved?
All right. Currently, sightlines, regardless of where the driveway is, are blocked by 2 existing structures. You cannot see around this curb because of this structure and that structure. So those are being demolished, those aren't being retained. So right away, that helps. Now, the other thing is, there's some kind of driveway that goes into this property from this particular area. By relocating the driveway to the bottom of the curve, you can see an oncoming car on your side of the road. You can see all the way down here, unlimited, several hundreds of feet. By putting the driveway here, as opposed to having the driveway over there, you can't see around this curve. And because the oncoming car is on the opposite side of the road, you're able to see there. So the current situation, I don't know if you drove on and then tried to drive off, and started looking around. It's dangerous right now. And this
Right.
will improve the situation drastically and meet all current criteria for site distance.
Well, when I went back and forth looking at it, I read your application first.
Sure.
And I was anticipating, we had this case, there was an old house up on Coburn, by Coburn Woods, an old farmhouse that was right up on the road. I don't know if you were involved in it, but it was demolished and it made the curve much better. Of course, that house that I'm thinking of was in the sight line. But when I traveled on this, yeah, those structures are close, but I was seeing the grade of the land and the curve and the topography going uphill, that I was seeing it differently. I was saying the structures could be down and you're still gonna have a tough time
Oh, I
seeing
understand.
around
Okay.
that
You
curve.
still have to grade the topography here. There is still a rise in the land that has to be, have to be graded down also.
But is this proposal gonna take care of that grade? Because to me, it looks like it's the grade of Manchester
Well-
Street that goes around the curve. Is that gonna be altered, or is it?
Yes, oh yes. When we do the grading plan for, if this gets approved, when we do the grading plan at the planning board, that's one of the things people will look at it. Besides structures blocking it, they're looking at topography blocking it too. We can't have a rise in the land over in this area blocking your sight distance up there either, so, yes, there'll be some grading along the
Because-
frontage.
Yeah, I guess my struggle with it is the southerly proposed driveway. You're right, it makes it great when you're looking south, because you got a good view. But looking north for the traffic driving south, you can't see around the bend, and it didn't seem to me like a lot of people were paying attention to the 30, I think it was 30-mile-an-hour speed limit. It just seemed to be a high-traveled road.
It is. This is a heavily traveled road and they do speed. But the idea is, you're looking for the oncoming car on the other side of the street. You're not looking for any car on your side of the street, therefore, you look on the other side. But in this particular area, which we have control of, that needs to be graded down also, so that it does not blocking your vision to the north. I don't quite understand your concern, Mr. Correa.
Well, just having, there's a lot. You're here for 7 structures instead of 1. The proposed driveway is, in my mind, at a bad spot on a blind curve on a busy street that there's fast cars on. And from the overall idea of zoning, to allow 7 structures to be, granted it's a large lot, granted it's a long, thin lot, but I'm trying to get comfortable, like, is this a good idea to permit 7 homes to be getting, I think, what's gonna be a tough exit from the driveway? I'm feeling it's a tough exit
Wow.
from the driveway.
It's not gonna be one, wherever the
Yeah.
exit goes, whether it's 5, 6, or 7, we're still talking about multiple residences, and I don't really think your concern is, in this case, with all the improvements proposed with grading and knocking on the houses, still remains.
Okay.
And
guess-
and it will meet the requirements within the ordinances, both planning and zoning, for site distances, no matter the number of homes or not.
Okay. The other question I have is just, I'm sorry, I'll get to you next. One other question is just, we've seen a lot of proposals like this, actually, but I think everyone's been on West Hollis Street, and we've probably
It's true, Mr. Curry.
approved probably all of them. But again, I'm not a frequenter of this neighborhood. Are there other developments like this? I mean, to me, it's like, is this the only one? Because with this sort of setup, to me, it looks out of character with what I saw in the neighborhood.
I'm not aware of any others in that neighborhood.
Okay.
There's a proposal for elderly up the street, which keeps getting deferred, but anyway.
We got rejected.
That's a different, but in this particular location of the city, no, because when we rewrote the new ordinance, we took out the cluster, or the PRD, or PUD, whatever you want to call it. It was totally taken out. in the previous ordinance, we had cluster regulations, which is essentially what this is, a PRD or a PUD or a cluster. They're all the same layout, they're just different names for them, but, and so that's why these keep coming in, because it's a better way to lay out the land. It lays out the houses better. It doesn't require all kinds of city streets and things like that. You get more open space, so there's an advantage to these types of layout, and that's why you keep seeing them.
Okay.
This is an older part of the city. There isn't this kind of open space to be developed, except the one up the street. I forgot what the address was, 122, I think.
I forget.
I think it's
Don't think
122.
I forget. It's been in
Yes,
front of us so
I
much.
believe
It is
it's
122.
Which is essentially the same. It's a cluster with numerous houses all connected together.
All right.
But not
Just-
my project either, so.
Ms. McKay, do you have questions?
Yes, I do. And I don't know if they're actually zoning or they may be planning. However, this is my neighborhood. I travel this street 2, 3, 4 times a day. It's a nightmare where you're talking about. Have you taken into consideration? My fear is you're coming out right into this intersection. What about the kids that are walking to school because they've got to walk? We're walkers up to the middle school, up to Pennachuck. You have kids walking. When you're coming up in the morning, sometimes the sun's hitting the right way and sometimes it's not, but you cannot see. My fear is huge accidents from people trying to line up to get out onto this street, and people can't see you coming around. And how many times do people just come flying around and then have to stop quickly because somebody's deciding to make a left turn? This scares the bejesus out of me, to be perfectly honest and
Well,
upfront with you.
I don't disagree with some of your concerns, but whether it's a few houses or 7 houses, the nature of the concerns don't particularly change. And with locating the driveway entrance to the most possible advantageous spot that meets every current criteria, the safety considerations are greatly improved. Can't do anything about the sun in the morning, no matter what. It's likely that, although there's no sidewalks along this frontage, it's a possibility that the planning board will consider that, but, so we may end up with sidewalks across our frontage to address your particular concern.
Well, there's a lot of kids that walk
I
up to that
understand.
middle school.
I used to live in an adjacent neighborhood. I know this area very well. I used to live in the north end.
Any other questions?
No.
Mr. Shaw has another question.
I don't know if you mentioned it somewhere along the way, but I thought it had been, or maybe Attorney Prunier. If you were to just pursue some kind of multifamily structure on this lot, do you know how many units you would be allowed without any variance?
Well, I'm grandfathered for 8 per the pre-existing units, and Carter's giving you a face, but.
Is that true?
Well, I was kind of questioning also whether those,
I have to-
those are actively being used
And
and
I-
what the city's, I
Are
mean, I
those-
guess, your opinion is there's 8 in use, I guess, but.
I don't know about the 8. They're, you
I
know,
would tell you there's probably 12 or more.
however many there are out there, the only thing I saw in our file was a violation of someone turning a chicken coop into a residence. I don't see any building permits, variances, COs, approvals for, I've seen, like, from the past record, going back to the 70s, like, maybe 3. 8 would have required a site plan, even from 1970 on. That's going back quite some time. So I think what happened is possibly one of the inspectors, one of the assessing inspectors may have gone out there and counted, physically counted where 8 people may have been living. But I don't really know the validity of some of those units. I think they may have been some structures that are either old sheds or garages or small barns that someone put a sink in and some electricity and kind of called it a dwelling unit. I think they just physically counted where 8 people could have been living. But 8 bona fide, single-family homes or apartments,
Well, like
from what I can tell, I don't see records of that in our file.
I guess what I'm trying to actually get at is, what would be a lot, let's assume that there's no way to prove that 8 or whatever number are already legal there. If you're starting out with this lot, what would be the total number of units that could be done in a multi-unit? That's all I was trying to understand. I thought it had been mentioned, that's why I was also asking.
With the existing size of the lot at 50,229 square feet, they would be allowed 7,260 square feet of land per unit, so it would be about 6.
Okay.
It'd be
6.95.
6.95.
So it's not, there's no difference, it's a straight calculation here
No,
in the RA.
Multifamily versus this unit density, there's no difference in the ordinance.
No real, whether they're single-family homes or
Or
all units in one building, it'd be the same number of units per acre, the density is the same.
Okay, all right.
But there may be different issues with the.
I would never envision multifamily here, but if I ever were to, I would be having Carter out there with me inspecting all these buildings to verify what we have there, because there's not much information in the file. The previous owner was quite secretive. He didn't allow people on his property and things like that, so. But there's an argument that says if it's been allowed to exist for many years, then it's legal, non-conforming grandfather. But we're not, that's a supposition, and that's not a viable alternative in this area anyway, so.
Okay, thank you.
6.
Any other questions? I think we're all set. You could have a seat. I'll ask, who else would like to speak in favor of this proposal at 75 Manchester Street? Anybody else in favor? Questions, concerns, opposition? Could I see a show of hands of who's planning on speaking? I see 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 hands, 8, 9, quite a few. Who would like to go first? Ma'am, would you like to come to the microphone? Again, remember, we each have 5 minutes. If you could lead off with your name and address, and let us know what's on your mind.
Yes, hi, good evening. My name is Mo Daniels. I live at 24 Charlotte Ave. I've been a resident of this neighborhood for 13 years. I walk this neighborhood every single day, and I do share some of the concerns that have been raised thus far as it pertains to children traveling to and from school. There are 4 schools in this area. This is located on an extremely busy street, and the site view for the existing driveway is awful. The property that is located across the street, I've seen the owners struggle to back out of their driveway onto the busy Manchester Street. I did have a couple of questions. I understand as the site has been proposed that there's a single garage unit and 1 parking space. I don't know anybody who survives with just having 2 parking spaces when there's birthday parties, holidays, and things of that nature. So my concern is the lack of existing space per resident unit. And then I didn't see on the plan any allocation for common area parking, so whereby you have a birthday party for your 2-year-old grandchild, where are the memes and the pepes and the aunties and the uncles gonna park, and how that might affect traffic flow. I do realize we live in the Northeast and snow is a factor, and I do struggle during the Snowmageddon a few years ago to keep my sight lines of my driveway somewhat clear so I wasn't a hazard to myself or anybody else. But I am concerned with the requested number of 7 units, the number of cars and vehicular traffic that would be added to an already dangerous intersection. That's all I have, thank you.
All right, after we hear all the opposition, we'll have that questions about the garage and parking addressed. Who else would like to speak? Sir, if you'd like to come up, and if somebody else wants to maybe be on deck behind him, we could probably move along A little quicker. Hi, good evening. Could you
Good
give us your
evening.
name and address again for the
My
record?
name is George Santamont. I live on 6 Blue Jay Hill. I abut the back side of the project.
Could I
we
trouble you
did-
to spell your last name?
Sure. My son still hates me for it. It's SAINT dash AMANT.
Thank you, Mr. Saint Amant.
Not a problem.
Take it away.
But we did a very interesting meeting with the engineer and the attorney
You
recently.
can lift that microphone up, because you're, or just pull it out. Yeah, there you go.
Hello. We did have an interesting meeting with the attorney and the engineer, and his description of affordable housing is between 400,000 and 500,000 in Nashua now. So I've just been kind of out of the market for a while, I assume. The existing property was never an 8-unit condo unit or housing unit. I was familiar with the resident. He just had a lot of tenants. The driveway at the particular development is extremely dangerous. I tried to pull up police reports recently about the accident. There was a horrific accident just at that intersection this past month. So I'm still waiting for that report. I am not a professional civil engineer, but by coincidence, my father is a professional civil engineer, and so is my son-in-law. And so I had him review the drawings, and there were some deficiencies that were not on these drawings for submission. One of the things that's not on this drawing is a benchmark telling you exactly where you're referencing when you draw this out. For you're going for zoning or for building, you need to say, this is my reference, this is where I start, this is where I design. One of the things they didn't show, and we did superimpose it, but you do have a sidewalk here. And so he's having his driveway where it's coming out from his line of sight. He's picking it from selecting it from the street, but cars in particular are not stopping at the street. You need a setback, or you need to stop before the sidewalk in order to see where you're actually going to be departing or exiting. And an average car is about 177 inches, so it's 3.4 feet is the length of front of a car. And then a sidewalk is 5 feet. He didn't show the sidewalk, so I don't expect them to be stopping in the sidewalk to make an exit. So at 8.5 feet, setting back from the edge of the street, he should be exiting. And so with this total dimension, there's no way he would see 250 feet in either direction for the line of sight. It's just not really possible. And then like the previous speaker spoke, we support 4 schools through this intersection: Pennachuck, Charlotte Ave, St. Christopher, and we get signs, speed signs and everything else, and they don't really deter the traffic or slow down the traffic. It's very dangerous. And then, like I said, these are single-family homes. These are not condos. What they're proposing are condos. And if is that the spirit of the neighborhood, I don't really think so. It doesn't exist currently, and they're saying it's going to improve a neighborhood. I don't know how that would improve a neighborhood by offering something that's entirely foreign to that neighborhood. And obviously, the biggest danger is winter. Winter's really bad in that corner. When the plows come, they clear the streets, and secondly, they clear the schools. And they have no place to put that snow in that corner. They just move it wherever it's possible. And I literally live around that corner. When we come around Monadnock Street, it is dangerous. People do not follow the curb. They center the street in order to get a view from north and south. And I've actually tried to make the turn off of Manchester Street to get onto Monadnock, and I've actually stopped traffic and saw traffic go in both directions, not even to be able to negotiate that corner. It would just mitigate, it would just exacerbate the problem in that corner. Thank you very much.
Any questions for Mr. Saint Amant? I think we're all set. You could have a seat.
Hi, my name is Charles DeVost, and I live on 13 Monadnock Street. And I've been there since 1986. I have witnessed a lot of accidents in that corner. It's very hard to even get out of Monadnock Street. The traffic, like everybody's saying, is extremely fast. With added homes over there, there's the schools, I mean, the kids going to school is going to be more prone for an injury from a car because there'll be more cars pulling out of there. The tree to the very corner of that driveway that they propose has already been hit by a car. I have witnessed several accidents, even on the corner of Monadnock Street, due to the fact that the cars can't see the oncoming traffic. The other concern that I had was, it's a driveway and has no exit. So if there was to be a fire in, say, one of the homes in the middle of that driveway, say the fourth home was to get on fire, how would the emergency vehicles approach that house with a narrow driveway and no exits, and the other homes behind that would be trapped, no ways to escape, no exits? That's my concern. Other than that, I think the people in front of me have expressed the concerns that I had, so I'll leave it to another person. Thank you.
Any questions for Mr. DeVos? No, we're all set. Sir, would you like to speak? Again, could I see who else is going to be speaking tonight? Okay, thank you. I see three more hands. All right. Good evening. What's your name and address?
Good evening. My name is Mike Thrasher. I'm at 11 Monadnock.
Good evening. What say you?
Oh, I am very much against it. The problems have been brought up by all of you. The safety on that corner. To add another entrance into that turn, there's no safe way to do it. The only reason there haven't been more accidents there in the past couple of years is there was no one actually spending time at the property. When there were people, we would see more accidents. In the winter, even if it's just a slight bit of snow, you come down Monadnock Street, and very often, you can't stop before Manchester. The driveway on this proposed property is at a steeper angle than Monadnock Street. People will be sliding directly into the apex of the corner and cause a problem in both directions. The issue of property values, I can't see how they can legitimately say that our property values will go up by having this type of a use to that property. Let's see, what else? There's just so many issues that don't look right for this property, for the proposed use. One thing that was brought up, that they looked at possibly rehabbing the property and turning it into something. I think the neighbors would prefer that, sure, honestly. Because it is an eyesore, and something has to be done. But the proposed usage just doesn't seem right. There's too many houses, too many vehicles, too many problems with extra traffic. And the specifics have all been mentioned already. I'm just putting my 2 cents in to agree with all of it.
All right, Mr. Shaw has a question for you.
So part of my original question to Mr. Maynard was, at least my thought, if I were in like your property there on that part of Monadnock Street, to me, the idea of having what amounts to basically a street immediately off the back of my property, when I would have never envisioned that in your kind of property. I'm wondering what your thoughts are about that.
Oh, I brought that up to him at the meeting we had last Tuesday. And I said, I can't find any place, well, I did actually find 3 spots in the north end of Nashua where a property owner had a street on one side and either another street or a shared driveway on the other side. Found it in 3 spots. Nobody wants that. So I brought it up, and to be honest, I was laughed at. I said, well, it's not going to be in your backyard. It's going to be on the other property. But we would prefer it to be a more normal neighborhood layout, backyard to backyard. And we brought that up. Just, if it has to go in, then something's going to go in there. At least do it in a normal layout.
Thank you.
I have a question. When you pull out from Monadnock Street, and you're going to make a left, you're going to go downtown, is it problematic with cars coming around the curve for Monadnock?
Extremely. Just the other evening, I was doing exactly what you said, taking a left off Monadnock to go downtown. Anybody who lives there knows you come up, you don't just look in every direction, you look twice, and then you're looking back towards the corner as you pull out for the guy that comes flying around. And that's what happened to me the other day. We came within 2 feet of each other, both slamming on our brakes. It's a constant problem. And then the problem of someone turning into Monadnock, coming southbound. You have to slow down right after the apex of the turn, and it causes issues. And it's not a safe turn to begin with, but we're stuck with it. I just can't see any reasonable person wanting to make that worse.
All right, thank you. Any other questions? I think we're all set. You could have a seat, Mr. Thrasher. Who else would like to speak? Sir, if you'd like to, oh, all right, come on up with the red jacket, and then you with the goatee next. And then you, got you covered there. Good evening.
Good evening. Jim Walters, 15 Monadnock Street. And there is a lot of safety issues. There's a lot of slate in the back of our houses. And what they're going to have to do is they're going to have to use dynamite in order to try to build those condos. And I feel like my house was built in 1940, and it's just a stone foundation. I think that if they start using dynamite or whatever, that is going to affect my foundation, And that's one of the concerns I have, but as well as all the other concerns that they mentioned tonight.
All right, we'll hear from Mr. Maynard after we've heard the other opposition about that question of yours. And, sir, if you'd like to come up, and just for the folks who, oh, do we have any other questions? No, I think we're all set, Mr. Walters. You could have a seat. Come on up. And for those who haven't spoken, it's perfectly fine if you have whatever questions or concerns to say, I have the same concerns that have already been brought up. Feel free. I mean, that gets on the record as well. You don't have to bring them up individually if we've heard them before, but you have the right to. So good evening.
Good evening. My name's Mark Littlefield. I live at 120 Manchester Street, just down the street. I've lived there for 20 years. And, the zoning ordinances are in place for a reason, to maintain the character of the neighborhood and the safety of the neighborhood, and to maintain or protect property values of abutters and neighbors in a neighborhood. And I have a lot of concerns with this, and I would encourage you to deny the application for all 3 of these variances for the reason of safety, first of all, because, of the curve, which has been well established. But also the driveway within 50 feet of the intersection. You're talking 10 feet closer to Manchester Street. We've already established it's dangerous. If somebody's backing out of that first driveway, or let's say somebody wants to get the car out of the garage and they have to move the car out of the driveway, and someone else is trying to pull in, well, that could back up a couple of cars, and somebody comes flying down Manchester Street, decides they want to take a left into this driveway. It could cause an accident in various ways. I also witnessed the aftermath of an accident just a few weeks ago where a car got T-boned coming out of Monadnock. A car on Manchester Street hit it hard, drove it all the way to, I don't know if it's Lee or Ashland. I'm not the next street up. So anyway, also, I don't know how this could possibly increase the value of these houses on Monadnock when you're putting a driveway / street in their backyard. And because of the slope, I think there's going to be drainage issues. Also, it's not sand, it's probably ledge, as the last man up here stated. I just think there are so many issues there. So to add a house, you know, above the allowed density, I think is a mistake for the safety, more traffic. Yeah, that certainly isn't going to, you know, add to a butter's values. And, you know, me as a neighbor down the street, it won't add to my value if their house is devalued. I would just encourage you to deny this application.
All right, any questions for Mr. Littlefield? I think we're all set. You can have a seat. Sir, you've patiently been waiting. After this gentleman, was there anybody else who's going to speak? We have a woman here. Anybody besides that woman? All right, two. All right, we have a total of 3 more.
Good evening. My name is Maurice Ferrigno, and I live and reside at 76 Manchester Street. And I would like to perhaps give you the reality of living in the curve. I've experienced I've been in the house since, let's see, 78, so it's going on close to 50 years. Brought up my family there. Early on was much quieter than it's been or has been. And I've experienced so much as far as accidents in that curve because of the curve and because of the traffic increasing on Manchester Street. If the traffic is going north, before they notice a curve, my house is in a line. It's been hit, had a telephone pole dislodged almost at my house. The wires held it by. The fence has been hit many, many times. Animals, you know, squirrels running across the road at the point of the turn, forcing the cars to stop without warning. I guess what I want to say is that I don't believe adding another 7 dwellings and the traffic associated with them. I'm not sure how many cars they figure 2 per household or 3. It's not going to make the curve any better. And the traffic going south on Manchester Street, before they see the curve, they have my neighbor's house, which has been hit. My house has been hit in the porch. A bike flew over it. As you can well imagine, I'm opposed to allowing this variance. And just a couple other points. When we purchased the property, it was the idea of the north end. What was the character of the north end? If you drive down and look at it, the character is single-family home on a single lot. And if you drive all the way down, you would find that. The 4 new residences that are being built later on the road are single-family homes on a plot, on a single lot. This seems to be, to have like a cul-de-sac run out is, in my view, not the character of the north end. What else is the character of the north end? Greeley Park. Mr. Samutis, who lived on 57 Manchester Street, his land in the back was almost part of the park, except for a fence. So it added to the aesthetic. The other point I would like to make, that probably been made before, is that the new school, Pennatrack, has increased the walking of the school students, and if they stayed on the sidewalk, it'd be all right. But they're constantly crossing, inadvertently crossing at the point of the curve, and it's just a setup for a possible possible accident. Let's see. I had a couple other notes. My wife and I sent the board members, or the board chairman, some information. The reality of allowing this lies in the police reports. Every accident was taken. However, they do not put in the missed accidents, the ones that almost happened, the ones where the brake wakes me up at night and they just swerve around. They don't show those. They only show what actually happens. And the street department has a lot of information on.
Keep in mind, your 5 minutes is almost up, but.
Oh, is that? I'm sorry. I got carried away, I'm sorry. But, all right, to sum it up, I do not agree with the board allowing the variance for those reasons that I've given. Thank you so much for your time.
All right, any questions? I think we're all set. Ma'am, would you like to speak?
Hi, my name is Erica Fournier, and I live at 17 Monadnock Street. Going last, it's pretty much like everything's already been said, but I will say that I've lived here for 11 years, and since then we've started our family. And my son plays out back of our house in our yard, and we do have a fence abutting the property behind us, but we don't want a driveway right on the other side of our fence. We feel that that's really unsafe, and we're trying to sell our house currently, and I just feel like, you know, the property values will go down. I don't agree with that letter from Keller Williams, because nobody's gonna wanna buy a house with 7 new houses going in what was once, you know, private backyard. Otherwise, I'm just shy and I don't like speaking, but the safety on Manchester Street, we take walks all the time. We don't go on Manchester Street. It's very dangerous. Like, we walk up the street and go down Stark to take our walks. There's a lot of kids that do walk home from school, and people fly on that road. It's a 25-mile-an-hour road, and people probably easily go 40 or 50. So I think it's just very unsafe to add, you know, 14 more cars coming out.
All right, any questions for Ms. Fournier? Thanks for coming tonight. And our final speaker, and we do have one letter that was submitted. I'll read in after this fella speaks.
No, that was from Mr. Ferrigno.
That was from Mr.
Oh.
Ferrigno.
So he is the wife, basically, but that's the people.
Oh, okay, got it. Hi, good evening.
My name's Matt Kay. I live at 19 Monadnock Street. Safety has already been addressed. We all have beaten that one. The valuation from Keller Williams there, $450,000, $500,000 affordable housing in the north end. I just moved into the neighborhood about 14 months ago. One car garage, 2.5 bedroom, well, roughly the same size house as these guys are proposing. It's only a $250,000 to $260,000 home. So I'm not sure how this property value from a single freestanding home to a condo association is gonna drive my price up to this $450,000 to $500,000 range that they've mentioned.
All right, any questions for Mr. Clay? We're all set. You could have a seat. So we did have a letter, but thank you for clarifying that Mr. Ferrigno spoke here, so I won't read that into the record. So, Mr. Prunier or Mr. Maynard?
I guess I'm elected.
So just before you get going, I just wanted to touch a couple of questions specifically brought up about the parking, how much parking space. The first lady there, Ms. Daniels, was about, is it a single car garage and a single parking space? And there was also the question about drainage and would there be dynamite activity?
All right, each house is gonna have a 2-car garage, and then be also room in the driveway for 2 other cars, so each house can accommodate 4 cars. There's likely to be dynamite here, to the extent of which I don't know, but that's not necessarily particularly unusual. It's done with, and I'm not an expert on this part of it, but it's governed and it's controlled by the fire department and their inspectors. They have to do surveys, they visit all the homes and make inspections to document what's there. The requirements in the fire department will require them to do limited blasting, not a huge blast all at once, but do limited blasting. And we will most likely limit the volume of blasters the best we can to fit the particular homes on these particular lots. But yes, most likely there's blasting. Like every indication is that there's ledge in several sections of the property. Again, drainage. We don't do drainage designs at the zoning board issue, but there will be drainage facilities. Each of the particular houses will have their individual drainage facility, plus there'll be a drainage in the common driveway that takes it down to Manchester Street, and there'll be leaching areas throughout the particular property to approximate the loss of pervious area with impervious areas. So under the planning board rules and regs that we have to follow, we cannot increase the drainage off our site onto neighbors' properties. And one of the benefits, I'll put it, of putting the driveway on the southern side is that the driveway will capture most of the drainage that otherwise would drain and does drain today onto the rear yards of the Monadnock Street homes, because the slopes in this area are diagonal. Something like that, they go at about 45-degree angle. So at this point, that's the best I can tell you, because we haven't done that design and we haven't got to the planning board part of the project. Most of the people, if not all, are concerned about current traffic safety and current speeds. There's nothing I can do about that, and it'll remain a problem for various sections of Manchester Street. If you go up to the Beauville intersection, which is further up the street here, you'll see there's a mirror on a pole, because there's another dangerous curve up the street that exists here. What we are doing here, no matter what we put in here, with the demolishing of these two buildings in close contact with the street, will improve safety, and it won't resolve everything. It won't resolve all the speeding that people want to do, but at least you'll be able to see around the curve for the majority of time. So there's definitely a benefit to traffic safety in that particular regard. There are sidewalks on our side of the street. They will continue to be maintained. So on our side of the street, we have addressed that for walking safety and things like that. The alternative to this project, which I think is the right project here, is what Mr. Shaw and I were talking about. In that regard, we got a full-fledged city street, which is by right. It doesn't require any particular variances, and it's by right, and we'll have a subdivision in there of 5 or 6 homes. Not the 7 I'm proposing, but 5 or 6 homes on a city street that will start down here and end up going up through and then over to some degree. I haven't got that figured out, but it still have the same entrance, and it'll go at some kind of 45-degree angle through the beginning of the property and then continue out. That would be a by right, and it will have 5 or 6 lots, 5 or 6 homes. It possibly could have duplexes. Those are allowed under the ordinance in this particular zone. So, I haven't thought any of that out beyond pretty much what we're doing here, because in my mind, this is the best potential for this piece of property. But this is a piece of property. It is residentially zoned. Something will be done with it. There will be homes on here, multiple homes, not one. 5 or 6 at least, if not 7. The things that people are complaining about, they'll get better with this. They won't be solved, but they'll be better with our particular proposal. There won't be any drainage problems. There'll be a fence along the southern line to provide some privacy. I think you'd rather have a common driveway than a full-fledged city street, but that's for the folks to understand and realize, but a common driveway is always better than a full-fledged city street in that regard. So people have been used to having this open space in their backyard. It's going to happen, something's going to happen here. There's going to be homes. We're here before the board is to try to select the best potential layout that works for everybody, and works for the city, works for this landowner, and works for the abutters. That's why this is proposed here. That's why other developers, other landowners throughout the city, many of which are on West Toller Street, have proposed these kinds of developments. They are the better layouts, they work better than standard grid subdivisions. But if we have no other alternative, then it's going to be a subdivision with a full-fledged city street and it's 5 or 6 homes. It'll have very similar characteristics to this. So, as I explained to the board, and understand, this type of layout results in less pavement, more open space, better layouts, et cetera, and they are more attractive than a standard grid subdivision. So, and that's the case before you. That's why this board has approved several of these throughout the city, but especially on West Toller Street, because they are better types of layouts for these types of properties. A standard grid subdivision is usually a last choice, because it takes up a lot of open space, takes up a lot of pavement, creates a lot of drainage, and doesn't give you any benefits over an open space or a PRD such as this one. Thank you.
Any questions for Mr. Maynard? Actually, Ms. Vitale has a question for you.
When you were first presenting, you mentioned that each home had a single-car garage.
I misspoke. They're 2-car garages.
Okay.
If I said that, it's 2-car, yeah.
So a 2-car garage, so you'll have the double width, and it's and the length of each driveway is at least
It's
longer
20
than a
plus.
parking spot?
Yeah, they're a minimum of 20, and most of the time they're 24, from the common driveway to the garage.
And you're saying that you're proposing to keep a sidewalk on Manchester Street?
For sure.
Thank you.
All right, we're all set. Now, again, by our rules, one and only one person can speak in opposition. What I'd like to do is suggest we take a 5-minute recess, and you folks could huddle if you want and nominate one person to speak on your behalf. I'd like, are we good if we take a 5-minute recess? All right, so again, folks, the public hearing is still open. The last component of that is one and only one person who has spoken in opposition has the right to speak, to address what Mr. Maynard just said. So we're going to take a 5-minute recess. If you want to huddle and nominate one person to speak on behalf, feel free. Hopefully you can narrow it down to one person, and then we'll charge ahead. So we'll be back online in 5 minutes.
You are welcome. What's that? I'm not cold at all. See what happens when you sell cars? You have to start getting your body acclimated to freezing temperatures. What's going on? I know, I haven't seen you forever. I know, seriously.
There we go. All right.
Hey, Rob, I like the purplish sweater. Is that purple or is
Oh,
that?
yeah, his shirt
mauve
is
or-
too.
Good combination.
Shirt is too. It's
I haven't
awesome.
seen that combination on you before. Is that new
When you
new
sit
getup
on
or
them
just
and
not?
you lift it up, and there it goes down underneath.
Yep. I don't really feel like putting the tie on today.
Huh?
I'm just gonna go
Yeah.
for the,
But see,
sweater and
he's
jacket.
lost all that weight, so now he's getting really style conscious. Here.
Just got rid of carbs, pretty much. But, yeah.
We'll be seeing him in GQ any day.
I eat a lot of nuts and seeds as like one of my go-to things.
Salads.
But the carbs I eat, especially, are like potato and potato chips. I still eat like a lot of potato chips. That's like my go-to snack. But I feel like if I can stay away from refined carbs of any sort, that's like, any of the breads or even like
breads,
any kind of cracker. I'm also gluten-free and I'm also egg-free. Those are allergy type things for me. So.
I got rid of soda, pizza, bagels, sandwiches, bread.
Yeah, I rarely eat sandwiches.
Or just junk food. But you're right, I love potato chips.
Yeah, so I just, that's like,
I gave up a lot.
seem to be fine. I eat kind of as much of that as
A lot of water. Drink a lot
My
of
one
water.
kind of sweet thing is dark chocolate, like really dark chocolate.
But that's good for you, too.
That's kind of good for you.
At least we tell ourselves.
No, it's
I drink
proven
a lot
that.
of
The antioxidants in that are good. But I can't eat.
Nothing sweet at all.
I'm allergic.
Drink
Yeah,
nothing
it's like,
sweet.
I mean, I just like, I do drink a lot of coffee, but it's all black. So,
It's okay, yeah. No carbs.
I drink a lot of water, but I always have drank a lot of water.
I think exercise is
Ready to go?
staying in shape. Yeah.
All right. Pull it together here. See if they're. Hi, good evening. If we'd like to get the meeting back in order. End recess. Again, we're still in the public hearing, the final phase. Is there somebody who'd like to speak in opposition? I think there was a nominee pointing. You, sir. Welcome back to the microphone. Again, since our transcriber won't know your voice, if you could give us your name and address for the record again.
Sure. My name is George Sainamont.
You don't have to spell it again. Leave it at that.
No. Like I said, the spirit of the North End, it really is what is identified as a single-family house, single lot, some room to play, not so much congested. But the issue is just of this particular project, as a private condo community, and nobody really thinks about this component, but they have to have private trash pickup. And I always envision city trash trucks running up my driveway and a 22 wide driveway to go up to a major dumpster to pick it or hydraulically lift the dumpster. And this would be right in their backyard, it's 10 feet away. I would love to hear that every Thursday or every whenever the collections are. But the back out of that driveway, there's no turnaround. There's no hammerhead turnaround. There is no provisions for that on that particular development. And then it's only, and the worst part is, it is complicated by the winter weather. It's just, you only can envision, some of us live in the North End, just envision what lack of vision you have coming around that corner. Even if they flatten the hills and reduce all the vegetation, but part of that vegetation belongs to Greeley Park. I don't envision them reducing that to a point where they can see further down the road. So they're limited to what property they own and what they abut to. But it just does not lend itself to the flavor of the North End. I cannot see, I would like to see new residents. I would like to see a very well-thought-out development. I did ask the engineer if he did have a Plan B. Obviously, he has a Plan B, but you know, he didn't vocalize it to us when we were at our meeting. But if he has a Plan B that would address all our concerns and make something work for that lot, that'd be great. But I don't believe 7 units in that lot for emergency vehicles, for traffic, for access would really, you know, serve us well as a community and also as just for the city, for zoning that particular type of development. But beyond that, I just think I wasn't, I guess going forward, I wasn't envisioning this occurring. We've had a very busy year. This is just something that came at such an inopportune time. It came during, we got the notices before Thanksgiving and everything else, and here we are tonight trying to talk about something that is kind of getting, development getting crowded into a lot of land behind our houses. And that's how I feel personally. That's, you know, it's basically stuffing as many pieces of property in a piece of land, not for the good of the neighborhood, but for profit. And that's pretty much what I envision what's going on. Thank you very much.
All right, any questions for Mr. Saint-Amant? We're all set. You could have a seat. And with that, I'll close the public hearing and open the public meeting. Who would like to kick it off? I'm seeking a volunteer. Mr. Lionel, the ball's in your court for now.
I cannot support this proposal for multiple reasons. It is, as many of the people have said, it is absolutely out of character for the neighborhood. It will absolutely detract from the property values of surrounding parcels, especially on Monadnock Street. There are, many people have indicated it's going to make the safety issues worse, and I believe this is true. That makes it not contrary to the public interest. The buildings that are on there right now are in terrible shape and are an eyesore. Sure, we'd love to see those removed and something nice put in their place. But this proposal, there's so much in it that I object to. I cannot support it.
All right, I'll leave that at Ms. Vitale. You're looking my way, and I'm looking for another volunteer, so we got a match.
Yeah, I am. I'm not supporting the application as it's being proposed. What I wanted to ask Mr. Falk is the comment that said that there'll be something here by right. Can you clarify me the by right part of it, of what, just one property right now? What by right can be done?
As far as use goes?
Without coming to any board for variances, et cetera.
As far as use goes, single-family homes are permitted by right. Duplexes have been mentioned. They are allowed as a special exception. So that's by right as long as they meet all the criteria and the special exception points of law. Multifamily is not permitted. There are other uses that I don't think the applicant has considered, some municipal uses and some institutional type uses. But that hasn't been asked before us. It's RA zone, which basically the city's intent for the zone, the spirit and intent of the zoning district is single-family homes on 7,500 square foot lot, or 7,500 square feet of land per one unit, 7,260 square feet for more than one unit. It is possible that they could do more units. They do have the land area for that, and they've got a little over an acre. They could mathematically fit about 6 units, but I mean, I can't say for sure. I'd have to see how they're laid out in a plan and verify all the other dimensional criteria that would go along with a standard 50-foot wide city right-of-way versus a 22-foot wide travel way that's proposed. So mathematically, 6, but I mean, I can't verify it unless I see it, how it's worked out on a plan. Numbers can always be one thing, but we have to see how they work. Numbers don't always work on a plan, so, but mathematically, 6.
Okay, thank you. I think for now.
Mr. Welch or Mr. Shaw?
I actually go back and forth a little bit on some of the aspects that were brought up tonight. As the variance has been requested, I do not support it. I don't agree with the traffic impact. I think whether there's 4 units, 6 units, 7 units, I don't think it's gonna change the neighborhood that much. I lived on Charlotte Ave for many years, and I don't agree with that part of it, but I think, this request, they're trying to squeeze in that 7th unit, and I think there's other alternatives.
All right. Mr. Shaw?
Yeah, I'm not in support of the application. I think, basically, I think what's been kind of alluded to already is, I think there are other proposed uses, or could be other uses of property other than what's been proposed. I especially think because of also all of the concerns that do exist with the traffic and sight lines and how a driveway is placed, that allowing anything beyond the density allowance already, I can't support. So a reworked plan with 6 units, maybe that's okay, but I actually have trouble even going through the other kind of points of law, and I don't really think it's necessarily within the spirit and intent of the ordinance when this zone is supposed to be single-family, single lot type of dwellings. Plus, further to that point, then I would really want to see anything that's done adhering to that 7,500 square feet. So, again, even if that 6 can be fit in there in whatever fashion, or if it's 5. And I do think that actually a city street might ultimately be the way to go as one option, where there might be further engineering and issues addressed with the intersection, or what would be what I would assume then would ultimately be a true intersection created across from Lee Street, whether this is a new street or a continuation of Lee or whatever. But that would, I think, lead to better usage. And I'm very concerned that there is an adverse effect on the surrounding parcels, especially and primarily those Monadnock Street properties that directly in the back abut this property. I just think that, I look at this, if I were living in one of those homes, I don't see how I would view this as something that didn't negatively impact my property values. And I'm not talking, I know, and believe me, when we looked for homes here in Nashua, we looked at some spots that had wonderful, like, kind of green space, and we knew, though, that that wasn't guaranteed. So we shied away from those places. But this is not the same kind of situation. in my view. This is something where the expectation would be that you're not going to have what amounts to a street immediately behind you. And I don't think that's the way the configuration would end up if a street was proposed ultimately. But I guess just generally, I have a real problem with that as well. So I just think on multiple fronts, I can't support this.
Thank you. Ms. McKay?
Well, I am going to concur with my fellow board members. I can't support this. I think that it probably would be best served for a city street because of trash removal, snow removal, exiting and entering. It's wider if someone's coming and wanting to turn either way or exit while somebody is trying to enter. It just seems more logical. There'd be less homes. There would be backyards to backyards, which is typical. This is my neighborhood. I live in this neighborhood. Coming up Manchester Street this morning, didn't somebody come flying out of Monadnock Street? Didn't I have to slam on my brakes? Happens all the time. So I understand. And, you know, there but for the grace of God, I could have been in an accident. So this really, really is not in keeping with what the neighborhood is. And I've lived in this neighborhood since 1983, and my husband has lived in the neighborhood since 1956. And his parents bought it in 1950. So it's pretty established for me to, we've been here, and this would be so out of character, but the fear of the exiting and the entering onto Manchester Street, no, that street, when I first came here, it was a quiet street. It's a speedway now, and I have too many fears, too many safety concerns, so I can't support this.
Thank you. And my thoughts, you know, you look at the 3 variances being requested, and up until this meeting, I thought 2 were pretty minor. You know, the 2 being the minimum of 7,260, and they're asking for 7,175. I mean, that's just nicking it, you know, and quite frankly, a lot of those little nicks kind of go through this board. And also the driveway at 40 feet, I mean, I was seeing that, I thought I had it right, and Mr. Maynard explained it, and it's like, yeah, it's just that first driveway, and I didn't think much of that, but, you know, the testimony of Mr. Littlefield was very compelling. I mean, how often would a home have an event where there's multiple people? Somebody turns up this road instead of, you know, going up Monadnock Street, they're gonna be turning around in that first driveway. Now you've got vehicles very close to Manchester Street, and if somebody comes around the curve, they might be held up, and it just cascades from there. So the fact that this is on the wrong side of the curve of this busy collector road, which I don't normally drive on, but my sense of being there just for a handful of minutes, going back and forth a few times, the sense of what I got in terms of traffic coming around there quick is, I'm feeling that's the reality. I kind of learned that quick. I struggle with all 3. You know, I was only struggling with the 7 principal structures. You know, I'm thinking, well, but the little nicks of, you know, nicking into the 7260, I feel this doesn't warrant, you know, any relief from our zoning laws because of the precarious location on that curve. So I'm not in support of it either. I don't know if we need to go around again, or if somebody wants to make a motion. I'll look to our senior statesman of motion, Rob Shaw, and see if you want to hazard a motion.
I'll give it a shot.
All right.
I'd like to make a motion on behalf of owners Carmen Capone and David DeBlois 75 Manchester Street. Description is for the 3 variances of, first, exceeding maximum number of principal structures permitted per lot. 1 is permitted, 7 are proposed. Second, to exceed the maximum density allowed, a minimum of 7260 square feet of land required per unit, where 75 square feet are proposed per dwelling unit. And third, to permit the construction of a driveway within 50 feet of the intersection of Manchester Street and the proposed travelway to the development, 40 feet is proposed. This is in the RA zone. The board does not feel that the variance does satisfy the criteria of special conditions of the property such that no other reasonable means can be pursued. And even during testimony, it was noted that a street could be put in and that there could be perhaps 5 or 6 single-family homes still put in this original lot. It's also, we feel it's not necessarily within the spirit and intent of the ordinance, with the RA zone being a single-family home, single lot type of zone, and very much this general neighborhood in this area of the city is in that kind of configuration. We also feel that there could be significant effects on property values of surrounding parcels, and again, I'll note specifically those abutters on Manchester Street and Blue Jay. Although that we do note that there was testimony provided regarding the applicant's belief that property values would not be negatively affected. We don't feel it's in public interest, and substantial justice would not be served to approve this. So I propose, my motion is to deny the 3 variances as already read.
Motion on the table to deny, and that's seconded by Ms. Vitale. Any discussion on the motion to deny the 3
Just
variances?
a comment on when he was talking about the property values of surrounding parcels. You said Manchester Street, but he meant Monadnock.
Oh, thank you. Thank you.
Oh, I didn't catch that, but,
Thank you.
any other discussion on the motion? A show of hands in favor of the motion to deny. So that's unanimous. So this application is denied, and that's where we come down on that tonight. And with that, I'll close the public meeting on case number 3.
The only thing if I could say one thing, especially for those abutters and those, there is still the possibility that the applicant would file a rehearing request within the 30 days, so you might want to just kind of watch and see. It's not something where we take public testimony, but it is possible this case could come before us sometime in the next couple months or so. So just kind of out there for your awareness.
All right. We're going to move on with our business. We didn't have any minutes.
I don't think there were any minutes.
Yeah, there weren't minutes
No.
in there. So we have an agenda for the December meeting. If folks, if you could take it outside, we're going to keep moving on here and just have your conversations out there. We'll just give them a minute to move on. Just quiet it down. So we have 6 cases on the agenda, and again, we're looking for regional impact. So we can look through, where is Medallion Court?
That is in Maplewood.
Oh, okay. Did you know that, Mr. Shaw?
It's a new street. It's one of the newer streets.
It's actually probably in Rosewood.
It's south, I think it's south
In
of
the-
you, I think.
Sure it's not in the other end of Cherrywood over part of Gagnon Farm? I thought that's where, yeah, that's where Medallion is. It's all the way down towards Buck Meadow, that end of, not Buck Meadow, excuse me, Ridge.
Ridge, right?
It's actually, the end of Medallion has the large, like, 14-acre lot that could potentially be a school site at some point in time. It's essentially a cul-de-sac that's got 5 or 6 homes all on the southerly side of the street.
Right.
But it's actually technically in the Rosewood Gagnon Farm part of the development.
So I guess with this, since Ms. Vitale voted on the last case, Mr. Welch will be voting in as to whether he sees any regional impact. And Mr. Welch is a no. I'm a no. Mr. Lionel is indicating no. Mr. Shaw is a no, and Ms. McKay is no. So we have no regional impact. Was there any other business to be brought before the board tonight? Make a motion to adjourn, seconded by Mr. Shaw. All in favor? I guess Ms. Vitale will vote on that.